Right, let's do it then. My colleague, sorry, I should introduce myself. My name's Kit Dyer. I'm a WASH specialist with UNICEF's regional office in the Middle East and North Africa, representing both that region and UNICEF a bit generally this morning. My colleague Lavun, also from UNICEF, made a joke in his session yesterday that he thought that session was the most important. I beg to differ. I think this one might be. With that in mind, I would like to welcome you all to this panel discussion this morning on the pressing issue of achieving SDG 6, which we all know is ensuring the availability and available and safely managed drinking water for all by 2030. We've all seen at the recent UN water conference in New York that we sounded the alarm that we're significantly off track in meeting this goal. Billions of people still lack access to safe sanitation and drinking water, with persistent disparities between countries, urban and rural areas, and income groups. Yesterday, we talked about being data-driven, and I wanted to put a little bit of data into this discussion this morning from our global monitoring program, which is managed by WHO and UNICEF, and based on data from governments around the world. In 2020, 9 out of 10 people worldwide used at least basic drinking water services, which is not bad. But the regional coverage, when we looked at it, varies from 100% in Australia and New Zealand, for example, to just 57% across Oceania and 65% across sub-Saharan Africa. Within sub-Saharan Africa, national coverage ranges from just 38% in the Central African Republic to near universal coverage in Réunion, for example. But there's also significant disparities within countries. For example, in Uganda, a malaria indicator survey revealed a 31% point gap in coverage between urban and rural areas, 79% coverage in urban areas, down to 48% coverage in rural areas. A 36% gap between the richest and the poorest, with 80% of the richest people having access to at least basic water supply, but the poorest only 44%. And a whopping great 59% gap between the capital in Kampala, which was about 97%, and Karamoja region up north, which is around to 38%. I think from that we can see quite clearly who's being left behind. So today, we have a distinguished panel comprising people from utilities, governments, financiers, and regulators who are working collaboratively to address these inequalities. They will shed light on the challenges of serving the poor, including higher costs, technical complexities, and limited short-term rewards. However, they will also share how, through expertise, resources, and incentives, they are making some progress against this. Our discussion will try to focus more on practical experiences from the panel in making water and sanitation services more inclusive. We'll explore approaches that not only enhance efficiency and financial sustainability, but also explicitly target the gaps in access. We'll delve into the importance of dedicated service units for informal settlements, equipped with specialised staff, policies, and innovative technologies to accelerate the achievement of the right to water and sanitation for all. Furthermore, we'll explore the role of technical and financial innovations, such as remote sensing and smart meters, in reaching some of the hardest to serve populations. Finally, we'll examine the significance of employment diversity in ensuring inclusive service provision. By recruiting and retaining a diverse workforce, we can ensure that services are designed and delivered with the needs and perspectives of all community members in mind, including those from informal settlements. It's crucial that their voices are represented throughout this journey. And through our collective expertise and commitment, we aim to find actionable solutions that will bridge the gaps in access to water and sanitation services, leaving no one behind. So I'd like to thank you for being in the room this morning, and we shall begin. So, first of all, this morning we have a keynote address from a very special person, I think, Pedro Arroyo, who is a special rapporteur on the human rights to safe drinking water and sanitation. Pedro, you're online. You have about 10 minutes to deliver us some of your words of wisdom, if you don't mind.
Thank you. Well, dear friends, when you search the internet for GWOPA, you will read, as you know, the Global Water Operators Partnership Alliance. GWOPA is an international network created to support water operators through water operators partnerships on a not-for-profit basis with the aim of strengthening their capacity, improving their performance, and enabling them to provide a better service to more people. Well, so first of all, thank you for existing and for working towards these goals. And of course, thank you for your invitation and attention. Recently, while in Panama on a mission, I was reading the summary of the results of the Water Conference in New York, finally published 2 months later by the Presidency of the General Assembly. And of the 9 fundamental points presented as the main game changers, not even the obligatory fulfillment of the human rights to safe drinking water and sanitation is mentioned. I confess, I felt a devastating frustration wrapped in deep sadness. What was the point of the social forum on water promoted by the Human Rights Council in Geneva a few months earlier to prepare the conference, with the participation of Anne Lestrade, by the way, whom I take the opportunity to greet and thank for her incorruptible fight for the human rights to safe drinking water and sanitation? What good are the reports and recommendations of the rapporteurs year after year to the Council and to the General Assembly itself if, when the Water Conference finally takes place, after almost half a century since the previous one, nothing of the recommendations is taken up or even mentioned? I recall the unjust and absurd marginalization of public operators in New York by not allowing them to register for the conference because they were considered part of the state. Well, in spite of everything, I slept well and in the morning working on what to say to you today, dear friends. I recovered my spirits. Uh, Water operators partnership on a not-for-profit basis. Thank you, friends. Seeing a UN institution working on this basis gives me back the confidence that what is necessary is possible, and we have an obligation to make it happen. We will have to keep rowing. Since I took office as special rapporteur, I have been insistent that the 2 billion people without guaranteed access to real safe drinking water and the more than 4 billion without basic sanitation do not offer us a window of opportunity to do business properly, but rather pose a democratic challenge that we cannot avoid. We are talking about billions of brutally impoverished people who are not and will not be business for anyone. But even if we think of those of us who live well and have the financial means, not everything can be bought and sold. Life and dignity are neither bought nor sold. And water, as I always insist, is the blue soul of life. Guaranteeing drinking water and sanitation as the basis of individual and collective health should not be managed from the logic of the market, but from the logic of the general interest, promoting democratic and participatory governance. That is why today, fortunately, drinking water and sanitation are human rights, explicitly recognized as such by the UN since 2010, even if some people may feel uncomfortable with this. Promoting democratic water governance does not mean putting everything on the state and promoting citizens' irresponsibility, but quite the opposite. Democratic governance implies transparency, participation, and shared responsibility and solidarity, which includes tariff responsibilities and good use of water. but from a human rights approach that guarantees that no one is left behind. There is a need for tariff systems by consumption blocks and increasing tariffs, which guarantee an affordable tariff in the first block as a vital minimum linked to the human rights to drinking water and sanitation, and even free of charge for this vital minimum in the case of families and people in situations of poverty and vulnerability. A tariff system that generates a cross subsidy uh, from excessive or luxurious use to basic uses. A system by blocks and increasing tariffs, by the way, that operates under an inverse logic to that of the market, which lowers usually the price for the good customers, applying economies of scale and commercial strategies. However, in our view, the focus of the provision of these services should not be on doing good business, but about serving the general interest, not for profit, guaranteeing excellent services even to those who cannot pay, and minimizing the water footprint on the aquatic ecosystems that support these services. Water operators partnerships on a not for profit basis. Thank you, friends. Unfortunately, as a result of the so called austerity strategies imposed in the 2008 crisis, public policies have been promoted that foster financial anorexia in municipalities, making it difficult for them to fulfill their responsibilities, particularly in terms of necessary investments. Through these policies, perverse tendencies of financialization are induced, uh, particularly in water and sanitation services, which undermine municipal autonomy and citizens' effective control over these services. Understanding municipal autonomy without losing sight of the fact that municipalities are part of the state and that governments are ultimately responsible for the human rights to drinking water and sanitation should lead us to articulate public public partnership strategies that guarantee the development of these shared responsibilities. Particular attention should be paid to rural municipalities, which are de facto marginalized in terms of human, technical, and financial resources in many countries. This is a marginalization in which the level of support and attention from governments is often directly proportional to the level of political and electoral influence of the rural areas compared to the urban areas. In these cases, beyond resolving these unjust grievances, uh, territorial interinstitutional cooperation is essential between neighboring municipalities at the county level and between municipalities and territorial institutions, departmental, provincial, autonomous, or I also recommend paying attention to the community institutions and operators that manage water, rural water in many, many countries. In fact, as I pointed out in my thematic reports presented last year to the Human Rights Council in Geneva and to the General Assembly in New York, a large part of the 2 billion people who do not have guaranteed access to safe drinking water are indigenous people and peasant and fishing communities in rural areas. People who, by tradition and currents of their worldviews or out of necessity, de facto organize their own community institutions to provide the water they need on a daily basis. In Latin America, for example, the networks of community aqueducts, la red de acueductos comunitarios, manage the water of some 100 million impoverished people in rural areas where the states generally do not even reach. Today in Colombia, this Red de Acueductos Comunitarios, after a decade-long participatory process, is negotiating in Parliament for the approval of a Community Water Management Act, to which I suggest WOPA should pay attention. The act in question proposes a strategy based on the public community alliance or partnership which allows for a consistent combination of community autonomy as example of democratic governance in water management with the support and ultimate responsibility of the state, in particular with regard to the human rights at stake. I therefore dare to suggest that you pay attention to community management and consider how to integrate it under the coherence that presides over the existence and work of GOPA, Water Operators Partnerships, support the changes on a not-for-profit basis. For this community networks, an invitation from GOPA would be extremely important. Well, finally, I would like to call on public and private entities and actors of all kinds to strengthen support for non-profit cooperation projects, particularly with municipal and community institutions and entities in rural areas. These projects can trigger cooperation between operators of very different sizes, but they must be based on the principles promoted by GOPA, not for profit, and relations on an equal footing, respecting each other's knowledge and practices, and on the basis of an intercultural dialogue that builds bridges of cooperation between different worlds, spaces, and cultures. Dear friends, in conclusion, once again, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Pedro. I think Pedro's posed a few questions and, as he said, perhaps even challenges his dare to us in his opening remarks. And with those thoughts in mind, I'd like to invite the panel to come down and take a seat, and we'll continue this discussion. Pedro, you're more than welcome to stay on for as long as you like. Feel free. It'd be great to have you still in the room if you're able to, so to speak. Thanks. Yeah, to my list. So I'd like to invite Faustina Balci. I'm hoping, Faustina, that I have your family name correct. Where are you? You are here. I know you. There you are. She's currently the Chief Manager of the Low Income Customer Support Department. She was created the substantive manager of this department from 2015 until 2005, sorry, until now. Wherever you like. We don't have names. We've gone informal. She's credited with transforming a one-person desk unit into a fully fledged department that has contributed immensely to the infrastructure development in several marginalised and disadvantaged urban communities in Ghana. She employs a multi-stakeholder approach in realising her goals and has a firm conviction that everyone, irrespective of where they live, should have access to safe, reliable and affordable water services. Thanks for coming down. I'd like to invite Eugenia Giotto, if she's in the room. Eugenia, hi. Please come on down. Eugenia is the head of the Gender and Diversity Department of ICA. I'm not quite sure, is a water utility, yeah? Yeah. And she's a psychologist and specialist in public policies on gender violence with extensive experience in Argentina. Welcome down. Yurika Winarendi. Yurika, come on down. She's from Indonesia. She's been working as a project consultant in a waterworks Semarang for around 2 years. She's working on several projects on customer relations and is responsible for coordinating surveys and providing technical assistance for local stakeholders. She's also supporting a project of Water for Life to provide clean water for low-income families in Semarang, Indonesia. Welcome down here. Klaus. Klaus Schratz is an associate professor in urban water governance in the Department of Water Systems and Governance at IHEA Delft Institute for Water Education. Klaus has about 25 years of experience in education and training related to the field of water governance. His main area of expertise concerns water services governance with a particular focus on service provision to low-income areas. In the past 10 years, he's been involved in boosting effectiveness of water operator partnership project, which is a joint IHE-GWAPA endeavour. And online, we have Lungi Zuma. Lungi, are you? Oh, there you are. You're there. Nice to see you. She's the acting strategic executive at eThekwini Municipality's Water and Sanitation in Durban, South Africa. She provides technical strategic service and coordination function related to the unit's research and innovation activities, and she manages the unit's partnership agreements with external institutions. So this is our panel this morning. I'd like you to all give them a warm welcome. Right, let's get organised. So, again. I have a couple of questions to each of you in the room, and I'm going to ask you to spend about 6-7 minutes giving us your responses to that, and if it gets really interesting, we may run a little over time. Let's see. So, Ulrika, I'd like to start with you if you don't mind. In your context, in the projects, it should be on, it should be okay. Super. In your context, in the projects that you're working on, what do you see that is needed most to achieve and sustain services in leaving no one behind? And when you're thinking about that kind of context, what are you doing and the utility that you work with to overcome obstacles and challenges that you see?
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Hello. Thank you for the question. So I have several points that are needed to sustain our services that leave no one behind. So I will begin with the proper communication. So I think it is essential that in our water utilities to have proper communication with people because we should understand customers, we should understand new potential customers, we should be the more customer-oriented. And also for the situation in Semarang, the presence of networks in all areas in the city is very important. So people can get water and service from our water utilities, because in the current situation, our water utilities extend the networks based on demand, and so not considering other aspects like inclusiveness or social inclusion. So I think it is important to raise awareness. Yeah, I would like to tell a short story, the situation in Semarang. So in our water utilities, we need to raise awareness on cross-cutting themes on gender and also inclusiveness, and we have to raise awareness on environmental degradation, because now we are facing land subsidence. So we are struggling to deal with the land subsidence in Semarang that is impactful on inhabitants, especially poor communities and also vulnerable groups of people. And I would say this disaster is mainly caused by urban activities, domestic users, industries for a long time, because everyone in the past, they are using private wells for fulfilling their water needs. And then, yeah, so when the population keeps growing, the land subsidence is getting worse and worse. And inhabitants who live in that areas are struggling and they have to adapt with the situation. So they have to spend so much money to construct their house. They have to, even their house is competing with the road construction every year. So they really have financial difficulties in fulfilling their basic needs, even connecting to water utilities. Even based on the research, the annual subsidence rate observed in coastal area are up to 2 until 5 centimeters per year. So yeah, it has significant damage on both physical and non-physical aspects in Semarang. So that's why we also need financial resources to extend the networks, to construct new networks, even to rehabilitate the existing pipeline that is sinking in the underground, yeah, in the under soil, and we are also still thinking about technical solution on how to build sustainable networks in areas with land subsidence situation. And then the last, we need political support. We need a regulation that push everybody in or citizens in Semarang to change their mind. There is to change from using groundwater system to the water utilities. Yeah, I think that's the best way that we really need to stop using groundwater and to stop severe consequences in the future in Semarang. Yeah.
Thanks, Yurika. It's it's quite interesting to hear some of the comments, and we'll probably come back to some of them. Faustina, can I come to you next? Cool. So again, there's a couple of different questions, and they're kind of similar, looking at what's the context you are working in, and what do you need most to achieve and sustain services that, again, leave no one behind. And again, if you're reaching into challenges and obstacles, how are you looking to resolve them and overcome those challenges and obstacles in the work that you're doing?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your question. Good morning to you all. To start answering the question, I would first want to give a brief disposition about Ghana Water Company Limited. Ghana Water is a water utility tasked with water service provision to urban areas in Ghana. Currently, approximately 19 people live in the urban areas that Ghana Water works in. And in line with Ghana's urban population and urbanization, our low-income areas or the urban areas are growing at 4% annually, with a customer base of over 800,000. Ghana Water is supplying about 3/4 of the population. And you will find that at least more than 50% of residents live in the low-income urban communities. But then only between 20 to 30% of them are directly benefiting from the utilities piped network. So to ensure JWCL explores this potential market to improve service delivery to the low-income urban communities, with strong support from the board and, of course, from management, JWCL has embedded the improvement of water services to low-income urban communities through the establishment of a dedicated low-income customer support department. We call it the LICSU in Ghana Water. And so the department is tasked with defining and implementing policy regarding water services to low-income areas. In effect, the department works to ensure a more affordable, more equitable, and safer water services to low-income areas. And the department also develops fundable proposals, sustainable business models, and business practices that will ensure that will make water service to the low-income customers a valuable revenue stream to the utility. So over the last decade, you find that the department has been experimenting with various forms of demand promotions aimed at subsidizing water connections to poor households. And we are also providing and allowing customers to pay their water bills by installment. Not to pay the water bills by installment, but to pay the new service connection fee, which has been identified as a major barrier to accessing services by installment. So here we give subsidies to the customers, and then we also allow them to pay by installment. Beyond that, we have also made the new service connection process very easy by removing all the legal and the administrative barriers to obtaining a connection. And so through this, we have been able to develop what we call a subsidized new service connection model. And remarkable results have been achieved by using this model. Over the past 8 years, we have connected more than 20,000 poor households to the piped water network. This is still ongoing, and changes have been made on the model, but then ultimately more than 1 million people have gained full-time access to the utility service in the low-income areas. But I want to add that our interventions are not limited to only getting more customers connected to the network. A far more important task for us is to ensure that these customers are not only good customers, but are also seen as value-added customers to the utility. Because the perception is, oh, they are connecting them. The LICSU is connecting all these people onto the network, but then the water bill will not be paid. So we do more by educating these customers and making sure that we turn them from bad-paying customers to good-paying customers that the utility will be proud of. And so far, we are making gains on that. Over time, we have also developed tools and approaches to make our community engagement and customer interactions more effective. Though we have taken great steps forward on this is still work in progress. We hold forums and debates to connect with low-income households. At these meetings, water user associations that we have facilitated by establishing them within the communities, the water user associations take the lead, and then we as a utility sit back to listen in and answer questions that community residents may have. We have also made it possible and created community engagement positions and hiring staff with specialized skills for equitable community engagement to strengthen the team. We believe that it is a great way to break the gap in staff expertise and to build in-house capacity for community engagement instead of relying on external consultants. So to conclude, I would say that achieving and sustaining piped water services to low-income communities is a complex issue that demands commitment, dedication, and of course, understanding. This is akin to building a bridge. It requires resources, it requires effort, and a strong foundation. But once completed, it serves as a lifeline for countless journeys and connections. And this is the journey that Ghana Water is embarking on. We are not embarking on this alone. We are embarking on this journey by connecting with VAY, connecting with the World Bank, with UNICEF, with the Red Cross, to be able to deliver services at scale. Now we have grown in confidence and scaling up through a solidarity-based water operator partnership with the Guma Valley of Sierra Leone to support Guma Valley to also mainstream and build their community services department so that they can also deliver quality water services to their poor areas. Thank you very much.
Oh, thanks, Faustina. That was great. Your last point, looking at the resources that you need, human resources you need, actually segues quite nicely into my next question. Thanks for doing that. So Lungi, the next questions come to you then, and it's about the workforce. The question to you is about how do you see a more inclusive or diverse workforce supporting more inclusive services? And then the second part of the question would be, how can service providers, like people who are in this room, how can we help each other to be more inclusive? Over to you.
Thank you and good morning. I'm happy to be part of the session. So diversity and inclusion are interconnected but not interchangeable. I think another aspect we can add there is equity. So diversity deals with the makeup of the workforce and organization, so who is represented and by how much. It speaks to the workforce having a bigger pool of skills and the abilities to work with them. It leads to creative ideas and problem solving within organizations. Whereas inclusion speaks to how the perspectives, contributions, and views of different groups are valued and integrated within the organization. Inclusivity brings trust amongst the workforce, which in turn increases employee engagement and productivity. So, from those two expansions, you can see that it is possible for a workforce to be diverse but not inclusive. Diversity can be and is all often used as a tick box exercise, um, and organizations think that their work is done. I think that for an organization to fully take the diverse box, we also need to look at how it takes it a step further and be inclusive. Workplaces are often or are a microcosm of society, with the different groups are represented, um, and can be classified, by gender, by race, social status, disability, religion, culture, etc. And as we know, in the water sector, our needs when it comes to water and sanitation services are very different based on the groups that we fall into and how we identify. So, having as many groups as possible and being inclusive in the workplace ensures that even the voice of the marginalized are represented in the decision making process that ultimately affects people's lives in a very tangible way. Because the decisions we make in our water and sanitation organizations affect whether people have water, how much of water they have, the ease of getting that water, the water quality, etc. The same also applies for sanitation. So workforces really need to be diverse and inclusive so that everyone's needs are heard and taken into account during decision making process so that no one is left behind. Because ultimately it is not possible or it's going to be harder for us to achieve SDG 6 without enhancing efforts for diversity and inclusion in water and sanitation within the workforce and ultimately within the communities that we serve. So I think as service providers in the water and sanitation sector, how we can help each other is through exchanges, like we've seen with the water operators partnerships, sharing lessons of what works and what hasn't worked in different organizations' journeys to be more diverse and inclusive, and also documenting those lessons in journals, articles, etc. Then for those organizations who are leading in diversity and inclusion, to mentor those who haven't, who are still on their journey, and guiding them to ultimately achieve this goal. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lungi. Some good points raised there, some things that perhaps I hadn't considered myself, to be honest. Klaus, I'd like to come to you if you don't mind. Taking into account everything that's been said by the previous speakers, what would be your view on that? How do you see a more inclusive and diverse workforce supporting more inclusive services? And then the same question again, how would you advise service providers, given your expertise, on how they can go about that, overcoming some challenges perhaps?
Thank you for the question. I'm going to freely interpret it. I would like to sort of refer a bit back to Pedro's keynote, in which he highlights, or he basically poses the question, how do we want to provide services? Do we follow the logic of the general interest, or do we follow the logic of the market? And I think that one of the challenges, or one of the main challenges of water utilities, is that they are expected to follow both logics at the same time. So we expect water utilities to operate on a commercially viable basis. They have to be autonomous, they have to basically generate their own revenue. And at the same time, we expect them to be the most important instrument to achieve the goals of SDG 6, universal service coverage. So we expect them to both service the general interest, to follow the logic of the general interest, but also to follow the logic of the market and operate as a commercially viable entity. And I think the way in which most water utilities interpret this dual mandate is by prioritizing commercial viability. So servicing low-income areas is often done within the context of what is commercially viable, what is commercially possible. And that also means that a lot of the innovation that happens in terms of supplying services to low-income areas has to take place within this framework or context of commercial viability. So I think also, if I refer back to Faustina's example of social connections, for Faustina, it's a very commendable approach and initiative, but she has to show that there is revenue being generated and that it is possible to do this in a commercially viable manner. And I think what Ghana Water has done is very impressive, but I also question to what extent it is possible to really ensure that this will lead to services for all. I think that we speak about low-income communities as if they are a homogeneous collection of households, but there are quite some differences in terms of the income levels within the low-income communities. And I think particularly for the poorest of the poor, I think the question is to what extent it is realistic to assume that it is possible to provide services in a commercially viable manner. And I think this is basically referring back to Pedro's keynote. I think that if you look at these, the poorest of the poor, it becomes important to prioritize the logic of the general interest over the logic of the market. Thank you.
Thanks, Klaus. I think I'll come back to that one after we've had our last panelist have a bit of a speak, because I think we've got a little bit of time, and I think there's an interesting question to be posed about who's in the room and having that discussion, but we can come back to that one for sure. Eugenia, maybe I saved the best for last, I don't know. So again, the same questions basically, looking at inclusive and diverse workforces, supporting the service delivery, and again, how can we learn from each other? What can you take away from here, I guess, is the question.
Muchas gracias. Bueno, mientras me hablaba en inglés estaba deseando que se acuerden que mi presentación era en español. Bueno, gracias por la pregunta. Me presentaron, soy Eugenia, vengo desde Argentina. Me invitaron a que podamos hablar de la inclusión y el trabajo en red, de la pequeña experiencia que llevamos adelante desde Argentina. En Argentina soy directora de Género y Diversidad en la empresa más grande de agua y saneamiento. Y cuando iniciamos el área, ¿no?, y empezamos a pensar que tenía que existir un área que aborde la temática, lo que pensábamos era en la desigualdad en las personas que reciben el servicio de agua y saneamiento, ¿no? Escuchábamos una y otra vez a las distintas personas oradoras hablar de esto, ¿no? De la desigualdad en el acceso al agua, y lo que empezamos a mirar en nuestra propia empresa era cómo estaba la desigualdad hacia adentro, cómo podíamos pensar en gestionar un agua y un saneamiento que repare esas desigualdades si nuestra propia gestión del agua y saneamiento era totalmente desigual. Empezamos a observar en nuestro país, pero también en nuestra región, que el porcentaje de mujeres en el sector representaba alrededor de un 11%. ¿Cómo podíamos gestionar el agua y el saneamiento de una manera igualitaria o soñar ir hacia ese lado si pensábamos o si gestionábamos hacia el adentro de una manera tan desigual? Bueno, la creación del área a partir de la presidencia de la empresa como una primera mujer en la historia de nuestro país que lideraba el agua y el saneamiento, cambia esta mirada, ¿no? Crear un área de género y diversidad lo que implica es generar políticas para transformar la organización que va a transformar la vida de las personas. Nos parece imposible que pensémoslo al revés, 11% mujeres, o sea, 89% de varones gestionan el recurso que necesita tener perspectiva de igualdad, que necesita incorporar esta mirada. Entonces hicimos esa mirada, ¿no? Hacia el adentro, empezamos a revisar nuestra propia organización, cómo gestionábamos en ese aspecto, y generamos un montón de políticas transformadoras que transformaron esto que digo, quienes gestionan el agua de nuestra comunidad, quien puede transformar la realidad de las mujeres, de las infancias, de las diversidades de nuestra comunidad. Este trabajo, desde la empresa de AISA, digamos, la más grande de América Latina y la más grande de Argentina y una de las más grandes de América Latina y el Caribe, nos llevó también a posicionarnos como AISA lidera la red de ALOAS. Red de ALOAS, muchas personas seguramente que están acá participando son parte, una red de empresas de agua y saneamiento de América Latina y el Caribe. Y como líderes de ALOAS tuvimos la posibilidad de crear una red de género y diversidad dentro de ALOAS. Y esto nos implica, este trabajo que hicimos hacia el adentro, mirarnos en cuestiones de igualdad o de desigualdad hacia el adentro para poder pensar en cómo transformar la comunidad. Empezamos a pensar el trabajo en red, empezamos a pensar que siendo la empresa más grande de agua del sector, teníamos la verdad que un montón de privilegios a la hora de gestionar esta temática. Si bien es una temática muy compleja, si bien es una temática que requiere transformar muchas cosas históricas, ¿no? Estos sistemas de desigualdad no son de ayer ni de hoy, llevan miles de años en nuestra cultura, por lo tanto el desafío que teníamos no es algo sencillo y como siempre decimos, no vamos a ver las transformaciones seguramente nuestras generaciones, pero sí hay que intentar y hay que dejar esas políticas asentadas para que en el adelante, digo, las realidades sean distintas. Entonces, este privilegio que tenemos de gestionar, digo, pensemos una empresa con una líder mujer, con una líder mujer con perspectiva de igualdad, ¿no? Con perspectiva de promoción de igualdad de derechos con mirada social, que crea una dirección. Dirección, para que sea una idea, dentro de la empresa es el rango más alto. El mismo rango que tiene la dirección de saneamiento, la tiene la dirección de igualdad en la empresa. Entonces realmente podemos empezar a pensar que si mi par en saneamiento se sienta a charlar conmigo, empezar a pensar el saneamiento con perspectiva de igualdad. Y si mi par en el área de provisión de agua potable se sienta a charlar conmigo, porque somos todos parte de una mesa transversal, va a empezar a pensar la gestión de ese agua con perspectiva de igualdad. La verdad que este gran privilegio que teníamos con esta envergadura de empresa que lideramos, que vuelvo a repetirles, que genera una política que es muy compleja de llevar adelante, pero que sí tenemos que ser conscientes que tenemos este nivel de privilegio para poder empezar a gestionarla. Tenemos un área que tiene el mismo rango que el resto de las áreas más importantes de la empresa. Por lo tanto, empezamos a gestionar esta mirada de red. Si nosotros tenemos la posibilidad, como siempre digo, el privilegio de gestionar el área de igualdad en una empresa de envergadura, que realmente hacemos una pequeña acción y transformamos un montón de realidades. Nuestra empresa provee alrededor de agua a 16 millones de personas. Imagínense, una acción que llevamos adelante impacta en esa cantidad de personas, impacta en un montón de proveedores y proveedoras que tenemos, en nuestro personal. Entonces, poder, de alguna manera, ese privilegio que tenemos, entenderlo como una gran responsabilidad. Y ahí entra el trabajo en red, como privilegiados y privilegiadas de poder dar este paso transformador a nuestra comunidad y transformar las desigualdades que realmente nos duelen, teníamos la responsabilidad de invitar, de enseñar de alguna manera, de comprometer al resto de las empresas de aloas. Y ahí se inicia un proceso maravilloso las empresas que estén acá participando, que sean de la red de aloas, las invito y no estén participando, que se puedan sumar. Ahí se produce un trabajo maravilloso, diferenciado con las coyunturas de cada territorio, cada país, cada localidad, pero empezamos a escuchar la problemática que tenemos a nivel local, a nivel territorial, y empezamos a darle respuesta de distintos ámbitos, ¿no? El que tiene la posibilidad de gestionar un territorio tan grande como el que gestionamos nosotros, tenemos por ahí cierto camino allanado, que para territorios que por ahí gestionan agua y saneamiento para 5.000 habitantes, les llevaría un montón de tiempo poder adquirir esos recursos simbólicos que tienen que ver con tener un área especializada. Así que bueno, me habían invitado a hablar del trabajo en red y eso es lo que queríamos compartir nuestra experiencia, pequeña experiencia desde Argentina, que transforma o busca transformar o impulsa transformar las desigualdades de América Latina y el Caribe en red, trabajando en equipo, y aquellas instituciones, organizaciones y demás que han trabajado, que ya han dado pasos en esta temática, realmente entender que tenemos que compartirlas con aquellas que están en otra situación para poder generar una transformación global. Muchísimas gracias.
Thanks, Eugenia. I think you kind of partially answered Klaus's question about this dichotomy between the market and public good. You've gone a little ways towards doing that. I think it was quite an interesting segue, for example. Eureka, you've asked for a couple more moments to finish what you wanted to say. Go for it if you want some more time.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for giving an opportunity. So I will continue what we are doing. To sustain the surface and also to make anyone will not be left behind. So in Waterworks Semarang, we are doing a cooperation with external parties. We get the support and budget from fire organization, Waterworks program, Water for Life Foundation for low-income families, and then from World Bank, National Urban Water Supply Project, and then we are also implementing the tariff classification in our water utilities. So we have 1 to 5 tariff class. So 1 to 3 for low-income families, and then 4 for middle class households, and then 5 for upper class households. And yeah, we really want to invite every kind of people to become our customers. So no matter their gender, their socio-economic background. And then we are also doing door-to-door marketing, trying to approach people. We call it as a one-day service. So we provide a booth or stand for registration, so people can pay and can register on site. And then our technical staff go around to do surveys. And then we try to make the connection much more easier for anybody. So we approach people in the remote locations who do not have access internet, who do not have access transportation, and also do not have time to visit branch office. So yeah, we are also working together with municipality of Semarang. So we met agencies, institutions, and other stakeholders. So we discuss about the issue in Semarang, and also we work together to make anybody in socially inclusive in our water utilities in Semarang.
Right, we've got about 10 minutes left, and I was wondering if I could pose a question back to you all. Sorry, Faustina, you were...
I wanted to respond to Professor Klaas's...
Can you grab the mic?
It is possible. Yes, I want to respond to Professor Klaas's question about whether it is possible to deliver water services to low-income urban communities in a commercially viable manner. My answer is yes. So far, we have been monitoring about 9,000 customers that have benefited from our interventions. And you find that their consumption ranges between averagely 15 cubic meters in a month. And if you look at the tariff that they pay, and we even do a cost-benefit analysis to see the staff costs, and other remunerations that come with our team into serving these customers, you find that Ghana, we are actually adding about $500,000 to utility operations annually. This is for only 9,000 customers. And when we also compare the payments behavior of low-income customers to the others, the middle to the affluent families, you find that the number of times that low-income customers go to our payment point or even pay their water bills in the comfort of their homes by using phones is much higher than what other utility customers are doing. And so I remember in a management meeting, there was this question about, we are connecting so many customers, are they paying? And I was fortunate because we had the evidence to show that our customers are even better paying customers than the other customers. And after that discussion, I have realized that that issue has not come up again. Because initially the perception is, oh, they are connecting, they will not pay. But they are paying. In any case, before they got the connections, they were paying 10 to 15 times more. But now that they have the water in their homes, they don't have to carry it, they don't have to store water for 3 to 10 days, the water is in their homes. They fetch as and when they need it. It is free from contamination and it is available when needed. Their girls or their children can go to school in the mornings. School attendance has improved in the areas where we are working in. Women can save time to engage in their productive activities. They are paying the bills and they are happy. I wish I can play some few videos that we have from some of our happy customers. So now we are doing well within the utility, even though we still have to work harder than other departments will do. At least I sit in the same meetings with the chief manager for operations, sit in the same meeting with chief manager commercial, HR. We are at the same level. So at that level, we can all communicate and make our views known. So I believe that when utilities elevate low-income services, make it at par, put it at par with other departments, then we will also have that authority and to be able to deliver better services. But where you put it below and you think the LICSU manager should report to chief manager commercial or report to chief manager operations, then every time they go, they talk about commercial activities and low-income issues are put on the side. Nobody wants to hear about it. Nobody wants to talk about it. You understand? But where you are there, then they cannot brush you off. And of course, sometimes they try to do that. But I don't allow. I make sure I also have my voice and that my issues are put on the table. But of course, it is important that the board and top management gives approval and they are also supporting you every step of the way. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, brilliant. Eugenia, you wanted to say something, go for it.
Quería agregar algo a las palabras de la compañera, esto que decía que salpicamos, los que gestionamos con perspectiva de género, salpicamos. En Argentina no solo incentivamos la conexión del agua a las comunidades con más necesidades, sino también incentivamos la conexión al agua y el saneamiento en los hogares a cargo de mujeres. En Argentina lo que lográbamos darnos cuenta era que la cometida llegaba a la esquina, a la puerta de la casa, pero las familias no se conectaban. Y acá operaba algo por ahí probablemente del nivel de los prejuicios, como contaba la compañera, ¿no? Se creía que las personas pobres no iban a pagar, se creía que las mujeres no les interesaba conectarse, y ahí trabajamos con el BID, con el Banco Mundial y con la CAF en financiamientos para que los hogares a cargo de mujeres o monomarentales puedan acceder a la conexión de manera gratuita. Y la verdad que fue un cambio sustancial en la vida de las mujeres. Esto que también contaba es escuchar a las personas usuarias, esa devolución. Digo, todas sabemos que atrás de una mujer o niños y niñas que no tienen agua hay una escolaridad mucho menor a que la que podrían haber llegado, hay controles médicos mucho menos regulares porque me lleva una cantidad de horas diarias muy grande gestionar ese agua y saneamiento. O sea que poder conectar a hogares y darle prioridad a que esa conexión, la personal hasta su casa, sea subsidiada a mujeres y a casas de mujeres a cargo de varias infancias, realmente transformó la vida. Y es esto de salpicar, de mirar con perspectiva de género, si tenemos X presupuesto, dónde lo vamos a aplicar, a qué hogares vamos a facilitar a partir de estos créditos. Y hoy el BID, el Banco Mundial y la CAF priorizan todos los proyectos que tengan perspectiva de género. Entonces realmente, acá vuelvo para cerrar con lo de la red, desde AISA tenemos contacto directo para gestionar con estos bancos, algo que no es así con empresas chicas del resto de nuestra red. Por lo tanto, nosotros también ponemos a disposición esos contactos y esas maneras de gestionar financiamiento para las empresas más chicas, porque es la forma realmente de poder llegar a dar un servicio de agua y saneamiento igualitario y que subsane las brechas. Muchísimas gracias.
I would like to thank all of our panelists for the discussion today. I don't think I can attempt to summarize what was just said, because I think particularly the last two, you've put your finger really on the pulse. You've said you have to listen to communities and understand the communities and then let that voice be in the decision-making process. I think that was pretty clear. It sounds like you've got some really good examples of how this can work with management buy-in, political will, and it comes back a little bit to what you were talking about, both of you, a bit earlier as well. So I would like to ask you to join me in thanking our panelists for what's ended up being a really interesting and quite rich discussion, I think. And also encourage you to find them over a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and perhaps pull more detail out of them or get in touch with them about how you can take this with you back to your own utilities. So once again, thank you very, very much for your contributions this morning. Thank you very much. Julie, you would like to have a couple of words about housekeeping, I thought? No? A logistical note for tomorrow? No? Okay. In which case, I would welcome us for a cup of tea or to the next cup of tea. Exactly. Super. Have a good day.
Sorry, can I say a bit here? From GWOPA. We would like to invite you today to Digital Lab, which is happening during breaks, where you can enjoy the use of HoloLenses for utilities. Just a quick announcement about that. Thank you.